Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our MERICS media briefing. The second in a short time. Last week we met to discuss Chancellor Merz's trip to Beijing. He's on his way back and Xi Jinping is preparing for the next big event. It's this time of the year again. Next week, China's two sessions will convene in Beijing. And this time it's a special round of sessions because it will also come with the introduction of the 15th five-year plan. Roughly 2,900 delegates will convene in Beijing for the plenary sessions of the NPC, and about 2,100 members will gather for the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. What may seem like the usual political theater could this year have real market consequences. The new five-year plan will show us how serious the government is about reforms, how it wants to tackle economic weakness, how to pursue the big goal of self-reliance and global leadership in areas such as high-tech and innovation. China's progress in those fields could be watched in person by our Chancellor this week, and so that will also shape German-China relations moving forward. I am Claudia Wessling. I'm the Director of Communications and Publications here at MERICS. I will guide you through that very short session we're having here this morning. And let me introduce you to three experts who are here. And thank you guys for joining to lead us into what will happen next week and to present their views on what to watch and what to expect of this year's two sessions. Let me introduce our experts, and I would ask my colleague to switch the slide. Katja Drienhausen is with us. Katja is heading the Politics and Society team at MERICS. We have Alexander Davy here in the room, and he today stands in for a colleague that was still mentioned on the invites, Alexander Brown. Alexander Davy will introduce us into the economic aspects of the next five-year plan and what Xi Jinping's motives behind those plans are. And last but not least, we have Helena Legada with us. Helena is leading our research team on China's foreign relations, and Helena will talk about the international setting that this whole meeting round takes place in and, well, what the two sessions mean for us abroad. So we'll have quick inputs by our three experts, and afterwards you will have plenty of time to ask them questions. You can do that, as always, by writing into the chat or by just raising your hand and speaking. If you have any technical problems, please just alert us in the chat and we try to fix them. One remark, the session will be on the record. Colleagues will flag if they want something to be off the record. And we are recording this. We will not publish the Q&A. The only thing that we will publish are the introductory remarks of the colleagues, possibly. So that said, without further ado, I would hand it over to Katja for her first input.
Thank you, Claudia, and thanks to everyone for joining us this morning or afternoon or evening, depending on which time zone you're in. Now let's take a closer look at what's going to happen at this year's National People's Congress, where Chinese leaders gather to plan for success, not just for the next year, but really for the next 5 years and more ahead. Claudia already mentioned that delegates are gathering for two meetings, the National People's Congress and the Political Consultative Conference. The starting date for the NPC, the more important meeting, because that's where the five-year plan will get passed this year, is March 5th. We're still waiting for the final agenda of the meeting, but we're expecting the Grand Theatre to conclude on March 11th, based on previous years. Now, what makes the NPC really important is, of course, the government work reports by Premier Li Qiang, by representatives of the NDRC, the judiciary, and other branches that will recap the goals achieved, the progress made in 2025. to discuss policy plans and goals for 2026 and work and discuss on a number of laws that are currently in the making. I'll flag a few of them that are interesting in a moment. But most importantly, really, is going to be kind of the adoption of the next 5-year plan, the 15th 5-year plan as the main ticket item. Now we already know kind of the big kind of picture that we can expect from the new 5-year plan, because in a way the CCP leadership gave us a teaser trailer when they released their proposal. They formulated in late 2025 at their plenum, which already set out kind of the broad direction, and what we will find in the 5-year plan itself is really the specific policy directives, benchmarks, numbers, targets for the coming few years. What's interesting here is that a new law is also in the making that will regulate the drafting of these micro plans in the future. So a real kind of legal how-to 5-year plan that's going to be kind of a guideline for the future. What's maybe interesting about this year, particularly, especially if you compare it to last year, is that delegates are gathering at a moment of relative success. So there's definitely going to be some feel-good vibes in Beijing, because despite geopolitical headwinds, there were a number of successes achieved. First and foremost, the 5-year growth in 2025. China recorded a record trade surplus, much to the chagrin of some countries abroad. New breakthroughs and innovation definitely provided another confidence boost for the leadership and trust in the kind of policy path taken so far. But at the same time, leaders also have to tackle a series of major issues that maybe at a moment of strength seem to recede a bit from public attention, but really deserve mentioning, because they are what define kind of how the next 5-year plan is designed. Because in a way, China is facing a number of serious challenges that turn the next big policy plan into a make or break affair. I'm talking here about the excessive competition, often kind of framed under the concept of involution domestically, income stagnation. We will see huge labor market effects of China's industrial transformation, digital transformation. I mean, we are familiar with some of these issues from our home countries as well. But in addition to that, demographic and especially fiscal pressures at the local level are key issues to contend with. In a way, Beijing will have to do more with less. And that's where the next 5-year plan comes in, to really plot the path towards a new growth model for China, which is quite an ambitious target to set eyes on. Now, if you look at the 5-year plan itself, what's already apparent from the proposals and party meetings since is that self-reliance, global leadership, economic and technological realm remain front and center. But it's really about shifting gear in the coming years, and this will require structural reforms. Before I hand over to my colleague Alex, a few points on what you can find in the 5-year plan. It's going to be about staying globally connected, but supported by domestic consumption as a buffer to hedge against risk of global markets. So there will be a genuine push to increase consumption through a variety of measures, both social policy reforms, regional development targets. But export reliance will remain really a key pillar of China's economy, and Beijing will seek to actually expand markets abroad. The second point is that the plan will remain really innovation-driven. That's been a constant, but we can already see a shift towards a bit more attention to China's manufacturing base. But it's not about just maintaining it. It's about consolidating and upgrading traditional industries to prevent something that happened to a lot of Western countries, outsourcing to other regions and job losses. And in a way, the successes of China's industrial and innovation policy over the past 5 to 10 years has actually opened a bit of room and breathing space for Beijing to focus on this endeavor. The next plan will be really green and resource efficient in its design, at least in its overarching targets. China is set to reach peak carbon within the next 5 years. And clean energy is already a really big contributor to domestic GDP growth. Chinese companies are growing, are global leaders in this field. So in a way, going green is a triple win. It serves economic purposes, it serves environmental and climate goals, but also China's energy security, and again, the broader goal of being self-reliant. Last but not least, we can expect to see some social reforms, real kind of shifts and adjustments in public welfare policies, if only to counter livelihood issues arising from some of the structural changes happening now, but also to kind of give a boost to domestic consumption. But the party will certainly not bank on social welfare alone to ensure social cohesion and stability at home. We will also see lots of measures to uphold CCP leadership, strengthen domestic security, patriotism, ethnic unity. There's a new law in the making to promote progress on ethnic unity, which will also feature prominently in the coming years. And with that, I'll hand it over to Alexander Davey for a closer look at domestic market and economy policies.
Thank you very much, Katja. Yeah, so what I want to talk about is why the 5-year plan matters, what the trade-offs are as part of this, and how the party state deals with this. And then I'll talk briefly a bit about this plan to improve domestic demand. So what we saw in the proposals last autumn was that we had 3 major areas that were shown up as the key areas for the CCP's goals. So we had developing a modern industrial system, accelerating technological self-reliance and leadership, and building a strong domestic market. Now, we've seen the first one and the third one before, and the improving technological self-reliance and leadership is newly mentioned. And it's really interesting the way to look at this is like 3 Venn diagrams overlapping with each other. The industrial system and technological self-reliance are very linked. This is what Katja was talking about with, China trying to be a industrial powerhouse and continue to export and also but upgrade its systems and move up the value chain. Technological self-reliance and leadership is also about, closing off of the outside world, about access to high-tech goods and being able to produce them themselves, but also the wording of leadership, saying that, hey, we're ready to take up the mantle, we're going to claim space, we actually can produce goods that no one else can. And then finally, we have the building a strong domestic market. This is something that the party state has said they want to do for a long time. It's a major issue, and it's something I'll go into in a little bit. But what we'll see is the trade-off between whether it's going to be industry and tech or looking after the domestic demand within the market, within China's internal market. And these are the 2 priorities that are juggling for Xi Jinping right now. And so if we look at the domestic issues and how there are problems with trying to address these, one key aspect domestically is central-local relations. And this is how the party center wants the local cadres and government officials to act in a certain way. And there's been a massive tension here between this because at the local level, they want to, promote GDP growth. They want their businesses to succeed. But that is often at the case, like a zero-sum game against other companies and businesses and other provinces and regions around the country. And they're trying to unify this, the behaviors and stop this internal competition. And this is where we see a lot of issues like involution coming from. And so to try and do that, they're changing how cadres are meant to act at the local level. And they're supposed to have the correct understanding of political achievement. And that's a phrase that we've seen pop up a lot lately, and that we'll see a lot more during the MPC and in the subsequent 5-year plan. Internationally, though, we'll see how Trump acts is really important to how the party state approaches its economy. Trump will come to Beijing soon after the 5-year plan is released, and if he's going softly, it's like the party state can approach the big issue of building their strong domestic market. If Trump is coming much more aggressively and things escalate again, the focus will be on technological self-reliance and leadership, because they cannot depend on the uncertain global trading environment. And so basically, all of this is to be understood in the idea of 2035, where Xi Jinping expects for China to achieve basic socialist modernization. And in concrete terms is that it's GDP per capita of $20,000, and they want to increase people's GDP per capita doubled from 2020. And so this is a bet. This is a bet that the party state is making. And by saying that they're going to reach these goals, and by showing that they're going forward, that means that, you know, they're really putting their neck on the line here. And that's what I'm looking out for, especially in the 5-year plan, where we see these anticipated targets, but more importantly, these legally binding targets of goals that cadres are meant to meet. Their evaluation systems are assessed upon, and the allocation of resources is made upon this too. And so if we see a strong drive towards self-reliance, it's telling us that they're worried about the immediate future. If we see a strong push towards the domestic market, it means that they think that they can push forward with their goal. And so that's what I'll be looking out for. Next slide, please. And so if they're focusing on the domestic market, this is what Xi Jinping has. He has his mantra of the 5 unifiers and the 1 opening up. And this is to solve a goal that's been plaguing the Chinese government and the CCP since the early 1980s, where basically as a hangover of the planned economy system, you have these issues of little kingdoms where local jurisdictions with Communist Party leadership and businesses working together symbiotically to have the best outcomes for their local area, for revenue, for jobs, for improving the infrastructure. And this has created a zero-sum game. And what Xi Jinping and the party state are trying to do is to break down these barriers and to stop this protectionist behavior happening between regions. And you'll see that here in number 3, they have to curb local protectionism and this involutionary competition. And they have to, regarding law enforcement, penalize protectionist behavior. And so this idea of opening up, we always hear in China, often it's not only referring to the global market, it's internally opening up within regions so that they can supply one another. And this is the idea of improving domestic demand. It's business to business, not business to customer. Business to customer is understood as improving consumption, and this is about improving domestic demand so that they'll work together and they can leverage the internal market. Very similarly to how we understand European integration and the European single market. And they're really trying to create that single market to protect themselves for the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Alex. And good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. As you will all be aware, neither the MPC or the 2 sessions or the 5-year plan are primarily foreign policy milestones or events for the CCP or for Beijing. But of course, the international environment does shape everything that Beijing wants to achieve in all of these other domains that my colleagues Katia and Alex talked about, as well as, of course, their chances of success or the sense that they might need to adapt. So we will see some signals, I think, on priorities and path ahead coming out of the next few days. And the 5-year plan proposals and other statements over the last few months already give us some indication of what we might expect. So I will keep this short and make a couple of points that I think will be critical. On the kind of first basket is the question of foreign policy. What will we see in terms of how Beijing plans to position itself in this current international environment, which is increasingly tense, increasingly fragmented, both geopolitically and geoeconomically. And the expectation is that we will see simultaneously calls for stability in relations, with the United States. This will be, I think, particularly critical ahead of the expected meeting between Trump and Xi Jinping in April. It is unlikely that Beijing will want to rock the boat before they know how that will go, and the chances that they might actually get some desired outcomes from those meetings. But they will maintain veiled criticisms of U.S. policies. We're all familiar with this language, criticism of power politics and hegemonism and protectionism, all indirectly, of course, targeting the U.S. and some of its allies, and also very much geared towards positioning China as a more responsible country that wants to bring about a more multipolar world, and that wants to engage the global South in making this happen. A second key domain, and this one tends to be a staple at the MPC and even in the 5-year plan, is the question of military readiness and military modernization. We expect that this will be particularly important this year as the 2027 centenary of the People's Liberation Army approaches, and also against the background of ongoing purchase within the PLA. We saw just this morning that on Thursday evening, I think Beijing time, the MPC Standing Committee removed an additional 9 military officers from the MPC delegation, which include the commander of the PLA army, so the ground forces, and a few other high-ranking officers, not the absolute top generals. There aren't too many left that are still in active service after the last few rounds of purchase, but this is clearly an ongoing campaign within the military. So what we expect is that this year, the 2 sessions will focus very much on the long-term goal being developing advanced combat capabilities and improving combat preparedness, of course, and we will see yet another increase in China's defense budget, very likely. The number exactly we don't know just yet, but I would expect that with a view to global image, they will keep it to the single digit as they have over the last few years. But an emerging priority, and again, this is not new, but I think it will gain in importance, it will come to the forefront this year, is very likely to be the question of ensuring the party's leadership over the military and strengthening political education within the PLA. Again, in continuation with all of the language we've seen coming out around all of the purchase of various PLA leaders and various generals. What does this mean then for Europe and for the world? I'll make maybe 2 or 3 main points here. One, we should not expect a major shift, either in strategy or probably even in tactics, coming out of the MPC and the 5-year plan. They're simply not the right formats or the right outlets for this to be announced. Xi Jinping and the party are very likely to express confidence in China's chosen path and in Xi's leadership itself. This is despite the increasingly difficult international environment. Beijing seems to feel quite confident that they have the ability at the moment to weather the storm domestically and internationally. And a lot of these is encouraged by their perceived victory vis-a-vis the United States in the trade conflict last year. So what this will mean is that Europe and other international actors should be prepared to face a more confident China over the next few months that is less willing to compromise on key issues and that is laser focused on its own economic and technological development goals and on securing stability of some sort in relations with the US. Europe is likely to be a secondary priority, if that, which creates, I think, challenges for Europe when it comes to devising potential kind of policy responses. A final point I will make is on the question of Taiwan. Again, 2027 approaching next year. It's the centenary goal of the PLA. The US government and other US officials have, highlighted 2027 as the year by which Xi Jinping expects the PLA to be prepared to attack Taiwan. And there's been quite a lot of talk about whether it might be the year where Beijing finally decides to move against Taiwan. I would like to sound sort of a note of caution on this. And this is not to say that Beijing will not feel that the PLA perhaps is ready next year, that they won't announce that. But the continued purchase within the PLA, I think, make it very unlikely that we will see military action of this scale and this complexity in the short term. Chains of command are very disrupted. The people who would be in charge of ensuring that all of the military services, all of the branches can operate jointly, effectively, is no longer in post. And I think this would make such an operation much more complex and much riskier than it is already by definition. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katja, Alex, and Helena, for these initial inputs. I think you have made quite clear that the two sessions and the introduction of the five-year plan might be a political ritual, but it's a very complex, multi-dimensional ritual, a complex roadmap that the Chinese government will have to lay out and that will impact also us over here. And we might not see many strategic changes on the side of China. So that means the challenge of dealing with China will remain just as big.